What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, June 13th, 2017, getting into the week here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we get into it, a couple of quick program notes. A reminder that Thursday, in our third hour, we'll be talking with Paul Topeti from the band Poker Face about this year's Freedom Palooza, which is taking place on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And then on Tuesday, June 20th, Dr. Renee Dufault going to be talking about her difficulties, as it were, with the Food and Drug Administration regarding mercury in high fructose corn syrup. And that's going to be an interesting story because I'm having a hard time imagining how mercury could get into high fructose corn syrup, but we're going to find out from her. And, of course, Friday, the lovely Lady Claire. Right now, of course, on TV, we're watching the Jeff Sessions show, and it was, it's a witch hunt. I mean, going right in, the opening statements we're all about, well, we know Russia just massively interfered with the election last year, and we're here to get to the bottom of it. And again, nobody has any evidence. It is guilt by condemnation and accusation, and Jeff Sessions is basically on the defensive here. They're out there saying, were you selling secrets to the Russians? Have you stopped beating your wife? Was your dog ugly? And whatever other questions they can come up with. And basically Sessions is coming back on out and saying, no, there was no communication relative to the Trump campaign. He wasn't even aware the Russian ambassador was going to be there at the hotel. And they talked about, politics in general, not the election specific. So Sessions is basically out there. Now they're talking about the firing of Comey and was that done correctly. And again, all of these agency heads, including the head of the FBI, serve at the pleasure of the president who has the right to fire them without even giving an explanation. And it has happened before. Bill Clinton fired his FBI director the day before Vincent Foster was murdered. But it is rather amazing to see all these people out there still pushing this whole Russia interfered in the 2016 election as if it was a fact beyond any possible questioning, when we all know it's just, first of all, it's an utter lie. Nobody's actually come up with any proof of it. And second, it is hypocritical for the United States to make a big deal about outsider Russia interfering with our elections when Israel has a carte blanche to interfere with U.S. politics however they want, and the U.S. itself has interfered in elections at least 80 times in other countries. So it really is hypocrisy on display here. Now, as you know, a lot of attention is being focused on the memos that former director of the FBI, James Comey, supposedly wrote contemporaneous with conversations he had with Donald Trump. And the problem with a memo is there is absolutely no way to know that what is written into the memo is an accurate reflection of what happened versus wishful thinking on somebody's part. And there is no way to know when the memo was actually written. It could be dated January 1st, and it could have been written 2 days ago. There's no way to know. So already following up on this issue about were there tapes being made, and the Secret Service is saying, no, in point of fact, there are no tapes or transcripts of any discussions between Donald Trump and James Comey. So at this point, it appears that it's Trump's word against Comey, and Comey has been caught lying so many times. It's not like he really has much credibility, and of course he's the head of the FBI, and that's going to damage your credibility all that much more. Now, apparently an Illinois representative has filed new legislation called the Kov-Fifi Act, inspired by what appears to have been a typo in one of Trump's tweets. He wants to declare Trump's Twitter tweets as presidential records that must be preserved. I think that's a little bit of overkill, given that it's social media and it's outside the scope of government, but they want to just preserve all the records so that they can go over them and look for anything that could be potentially incriminating in a future witch trial, as it were. Now, Comey himself has canceled his hearing tomorrow with the House committee because he wants to talk to his former boss at the FBI, Robert Mueller, who is now, of course, the special counsel looking into the Russia connection. And apparently they're going to strategize their conformity, which is Washington, D.C. speak, for agreeing ahead of time what the lies are going to be. So they're just out there just spinning this. Now, as you know, a lot of stuff came out of Comey's testimony, including the fact that Loretta Lynch did seem to be interceding on behalf of Hillary Clinton, first of all asking Comey to reduce the issue from an actual investigation down to simply a matter. And apparently there was a little bit of friction and hostility between Loretta Lynch and Comey over this matter. But basically, again, this was an investigation. This wasn't justice. This was politics. Now, as you know, one of the most damaging things for Comey to come out of his testimony was this idea that he was the source of a leak that went through this professor at Columbia University to the New York Times. New York Times published it. It was this story that resulted in Attorney General Sessions recusing himself from the investigation into the Russia link, which opened the door for the appointment of the special counsel. And now, of course, we know that apparently Comey intended for that exact thing to happen. But it's getting a little bit more interesting because Donald Trump's lawyers are saying they're looking into this issue of leaks, and they're finding out that Comey was leaking material to the corporate media for months. And this obviously is a violation of his employment agreement with the FBI. It certainly violates the trust and confidence in him by the president. And it's potentially illegal. This was actually being carried on Fox News, and it goes even further, saying that James Comey may have been the primary leaker to the media all along. That all of that damaging stuff coming out from the White House to the media wasn't coming from some lowly staffer. It was coming from the then head of the FBI, James Comey. So this is really starting to get ugly. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, already a lot of pressure is starting to come down on Robert Mueller and his position as a special counsel. First of all, because everybody now understands that his position as a special counsel was literally engineered by James Comey. And it was based on this dossier which has since been discredited. There is no evidence supporting any of this stuff. It's a witch hunt. And Newt Gingrich has come on out saying that it is obvious for the special counsel to be impartial. Mueller is James Comey's former boss at the FBI, and Mueller is staffing up his office with all of these known Clinton-Obama supporters and donors. So they're going in there with a bias. It's not an investigation. They're not impartial. They're not objective. It's a hatchet job. They're still out there trying to find some way to bring Donald Trump crashing down and whatever else they're going to do. Boy, the hackers are at my server again already. Well, the children must have their tantrums. Now, Ann Coulter, I'm going to have to take back some of the bad things I've said about her in the past, because she's out there saying that Sessions should unrecuse himself and fire Robert Mueller because of the very obvious bias and conflict of interest that Mueller has built into the office of the special counsel. Sean Hannity is out there saying this is a witch hunt, and it does need to be shut down immediately. And Representative Louis Gohmert on Fox and Friends was saying that Mueller is dirty and should recuse himself. So already this is starting to fall apart. Nobody is going to trust this guy to do an honest, objective investigation. Now then, little bit of a reminder for those of you who may have forgotten, because it was a long time ago. Back in 2001, when Robert Mueller was head of the FBI and James Comey worked for him, they were the people behind all of this nonsense of framing innocent people for the anthrax attacks. And there was a suspect who was out there who was caught going into the section of the U.S. military lab where the anthrax used in the envelopes was kept. He was never touched. And instead they went after all these other people on the flimsiest of evidence and no evidence at all, including Stephen Hatfield, who wound up successfully suing the government for almost $5 million. And that was all done by Robert Mueller and James Comey. They framed this guy. They framed this innocent man. Why are they even still in the government, let alone in positions of such power and authority? Or is that what it takes to be in positions of power and authority? Ruin people's lives. Now, Carter Page has sent a request to the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein seeking the release of the information used to obtain the FISA warrant to monitor his communications. And if it turns out that the information used to obtain that FISA warrant was based on that now discredited dossier about Donald Trump and the prostitutes in Moscow, he's got a case to sue. Because the FISA warrant was obtained fraudulently on the basis of made-up information. There was no case. Now, Pat Buchanan is out there saying that we're actually nearing a real civil war. He points out Donald Trump may be the chief of state, the head of the government, and the commander-in-chief, but his administration is shot through with disloyalists who are plotting to bring him down. I think that little play, the remake of Julius Caesar with the character playing Julius Caesar looking like Trump, I think that is actually bang spot on. Trump is surrounded by enemies who he thinks are working for him and with him, and they are not. And we're coming up on a point where the capital city, Washington, D.C., is seeking the overthrow of the sovereign. Now, I don't want to see a civil war in this country. A lot of people died during the last one. Now, I'm physically too old to take part in any kind of a conflict. But if a civil war does sadly come to this nation, I'm going to tell you right now where I'm going to be standing. I'm going to be standing on the side of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I'm definitely not going to be on the side of all these people who have corrupted our nation with all of this drug running and drug money laundering. So now you know where my allegiances lie on that one here. By the way, a little interesting fact, despite all the concerns over the careless handling, to be generous, of classified information by Hillary Clinton, she still has her State Department security clearance. And her top aides all do as well. And Senator Chuck Grassley is basically released that information and say, this is not the way it's supposed to work. And I've been through the process many, many years ago when I was working in aerospace. I briefly held a security clearance, and you hold that clearance only so long as you are doing the job. And once the job is over, the clearance is revoked. You surrender or destroy all your classified materials. That's the way it's supposed to work. Hillary Clinton is a private citizen. She is not in the employ of the federal government. Why does she still have a security clearance for the State Department? It's a very serious question. Now, Judicial Watch has come on out saying that they have now uncovered hundreds of Hillary Clinton emails that she failed to turn over to the State Department. Remember when she said, we turned them over, I erased 30,000 emails about basket making or whatever it was going to be, and we've turned over all the relevant emails, and Judicial Watch is saying no. They have found hundreds she was supposed to turn over, and she didn't. So, now then, let's get on back to Seth Rich and the DNC leak, because there is new information surfacing. Remember, there was originally this Romanian hacker, Guccifer. Guccifer. No, Guccifer, that's how it was pronounced. And he was the one who came forward and said that while he was inside Hillary's private email server, and it was very easy to get into it, he saw at least 10 foreign IPs prowling around there looking at files. Then Guccifer himself got arrested and he went away, and all of a sudden there was Guccifer 2.0, who was pointed at as the Russian hacker who was hacking the DNC emails for Russia to give them to WikiLeaks. There is new information that has come on out saying that this Guccifer 2.0 never existed. He's not a real person. He's a fabrication. Was created by the Democratic National Committee to be able to blame Russia for the Seth Rich leaks. And apparently it was all designed by one of their employees named Warren Flood. So, now, there's a new video that has surfaced regarding the night of Seth Rich's murder and how seriously he was actually hurt. Now remember, I'm going to preface this by going back to this doctor who'd been in the ER where Seth Rich was taken to. And he basically posted anonymously saying the wounds weren't serious. They were not lethal. They were not dangerous. They were very, very minor. He shouldn't have died from them. Now we have this other witness who saw Seth Rich after he was shot. And Seth Rich was still walking and apparently not even aware that he'd actually been shot. And that's not uncommon, especially if you're shot with a small caliber weapon in some fleshy part of your body. The shock can cut on in, and you won't even realize you've been hit. Talk to soldiers who've been in combat, who've been hit with shrapnel, and they don't even know they're hit. That seems to be what happened. There is no reason Seth Rich should have died of those gunshot wounds. And remember what the doctor said. All of a sudden, a whole bunch of law enforcement came on in. Everybody was kicked out of the emergency room, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, Seth Rich is at death's door. Now, speaking of death's door, another article, this came out of Investment Watch blog. Remember not too long ago where there was a prosecutor, Barrington Wisenant, who was found floating on the beach in Miami in Debbie Wasserman Schultz District? Apparently, the body count down there is now a total of 3. In addition to Barrington, there's Naftali Wicks and another one named Urban Gonzalez, and they all seem to be involved tangentially with issues of immigration and immigration fraud. So the dead bodies are still piling up. By the way, remember that Pulse nightclub shooting? And they had Omar Mateen's 911 call, and they released a transcript, but they wouldn't release a recording of the call itself. According to this story that appeared over in 12160.info, Loretta Lynch ordered the FBI to edit the transcripts of the Pulse nightclub shooter. In other words, what the transcript told us he said was an absolute fabrication. It was a lie. Now, the corporate media is still out there trying to protect the deep state. Story that came out of the Associated Press, and it's talking about these arrests out in Indiana for fraudulent voter registrations. And, pardon me, I'm going to read you a direct quote from the AP article. 12 employees of a Democrat-linked group focused on mobilizing black voters in Indiana are accused of submitting fake or fraudulent voter registration applications ahead of last year's general election in order to meet quotas. End quote. See, they're already trying to explain it away. Oh, no, they were just out to meet quotas. They were out to meet quotas. No, they weren't. Those fake voter registrations were being used to try and steal the election for Hillary Clinton. And again, this is a reminder that all of the detected election fraud that took place last year favored Hillary Clinton. And they're trying to claim that Russia was interfering with the election. Does it make sense Russia is trying to rig the election for Hillary Clinton when the official story is Russia was trying to put Trump in? Of course not. It's like Assad gassing his own civilians. The story is absurd on the face of it. If you think about it, it simply does not make sense. Now, continuing on the realm of fake news, MSNBC did a random person on the street interview basically regarding the testimony of James Comey, and they identified that this woman as just somebody that passed on the street. Turned out she was the C8 Latino Vote Director for the Obama campaign, and she lists her career as a political strategist. She's an operative, and MSNBC tried to make it look like she's just an ordinary human being on the street. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're watching the continuing Jeff Sessions show, and they're basically just pounding on him, trying to find something that they can claim that Donald Trump did. Nancy Pelosi is out there with another one of her very common, increasingly common, bizarre statements that Donald Trump will self-impeach. He's going to do it to himself. We don't need to do anything. Nancy, read the Constitution. Congress has to impeach. Actually, the House impeaches and the Senate has to remove. And it's amazing to see how they're going after Jeff Sessions. When you remember that Attorney General Eric Holder ran guns to Mexico, lied to Congress about it, was found in contempt, and never prosecuted. So again, we're seeing this hypocrisy and double standard. It's okay when we do it, but when you do it, by golly, we're just going to come right after you. So again, we were talking about all the fake news that's going on, and I think back to yesterday and that Reuters article that literally claimed that James Comey had said Trump interfered with the elections, when what Comey actually said was no, there'd been no interference. And then we talked about that ABC News creative editing of the video of Comey to make it look like he was saying things that he never actually said. So it's probably not too surprising, and I find myself firmly in agreement. Donald Trump is out there saying the fake news media, meaning the corporate media, has never been so wrong or so dirty. Purposely incorrect stories and phony sources to meet their agenda of hate. And it's not really an agenda of hate. It's an agenda of bringing the narcocracy back into power and consolidating it. Because right now, that narcocracy is afraid they could collapse. When you have a significant portion of the government, including the president, who are not part of that CIA cocaine cartel, you are always at risk of discovery, exposure, prosecution. By the way, there's a new poll from the Public Policy Polling Group, and they found that 42% of Trump voters think it's actually appropriate to body slam members of the media. Yeah, when you look at how the corporate media is behaving and how they're lying and spinning and deceiving, yeah, it's kind of hard to defend that one. Now then, as you know, we had a caller into the show yesterday that was talking about Megyn Kelly's interview with Alex Jones, and coming hard on her, the heels of her debacle with Vladimir Putin. It is already backflashing. It's causing a huge amounts of problem. And obviously, the families of the supposed Sandy Hook victims have canceled plans to have Megyn Kelly hosting their Sandy Hook benefit because of the Alex Jones interview. And how dare you give that conspiracy theorist airtime? And apparently NBC is not happy that by giving Alex Jones this interview, Megyn Kelly has sort of given an air of legitimacy to the independent media. Not that we needed her help in this day and age of provable corporate media lying time and time and time again. But J.P. Morgan has now pulled their ads from NBC News after Megyn Kelly's Alex Jones interview, which they describe as repulsive. It's repulsive. And you know something? It's exactly this kind of overreaction that makes it obvious some great and terrible secret about Sandy Hook is being hidden. Now, normally there is a tradition that every year when the NBA finals are over and they have the NBA champions, they get a visit to the White House. And apparently the Golden State Warriors decided they were going to pass. And I think we have allowed politics to infuse too many different aspects of our life. Yes, we need to be aware of politics. But let's not let it get into sports. Let's not let it get into where we get our coffee. Let's not let it into the restaurants because politics is dirty and corrupt, and we really ought not to let it corrupt and dirty the rest of our society, which seems to be happening right now. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm watching the Sessions testimony. And Sessions just really made Cotton look ridiculous here because they're asking him, Did you meet with any Russians on behalf of Trump? No, I didn't. Did you know anybody who did? No, I didn't. And then this guy Cotton comes on. So, well, you know, they wouldn't have to actually meet. They could use dead drops, or they could use a handoff. They could just pass each other on the subway, and Sessions actually laughed at that. I mean, they're getting into the realm of James Bond movies, just trying to say, you know, I think they've given up being able to prove that there was any Russian collusion, and they're now trying to bet the farm on there could have been. You can't prove there wasn't. You can't prove they weren't swapping microfilm inside hollowed-out nickels, and it really is getting ridiculous out there. All right, let's take a phone call. Mike in Alaska, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Did you see this play in New York where they're assassination in the play?
Yeah, it's a redo of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. I didn't see it. I mean, I'm very familiar with the play itself, but I thought it really was kind of tasteless to have Caesar dressed up as Donald Trump. But on the other hand, if you really think about what's going on inside Trump's own administration, it actually is a powerful metaphor. Donald Trump is surrounded by people who are plotting against him.
Absolutely, and I'm a big Shakespeare and history fan, and I often watch these outdoor plays, and I've watched Julius Caesar before, and yeah, it's tacky, it's tasteless. It doesn't really. I mean, I've seen plays where they update them or they make them retro or 1950s.
Yes,
but,
some of the movies done by Kenneth Branagh, they've been really, really good. Although they kind of play fast and loose with the script. You know,
absolutely. But I wanted to mention. Historically, this is what gets me from the historical point of view is, do the people who do this ever ask themselves what happened after Caesar died? Because we all know that's a historical fact, 2,000 years ago, but there was a giant civil war.
Yes, there was.
And, I mean, who is Mark Antony? Who is Cicero? Who is Cato? Who is, what happened to Brutus? What happened to Cassius? What happened to the Senate? The Senate was closed, completely closed.
Yes.
So if we go with them into their insanity and we delve into that with them and close our eyes, they're asking us to go to a civil war scenario. That's crazy.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. But if they push hard enough, it's going to happen. And if we have a civil war in this country, it will invite attacks by all those nations we've made enemies of over the last 50 years. And that's why this is incredibly dangerous. It could be the end of the United States of America. Now, the interesting thing about Shakespeare, I mean, there's absolutely no question he was an absolutely brilliant playwright. His material has held up over time. But you need to remember that he, too, had a political bias, especially regarding the plays about English history. And before William Shakespeare was able to open the globe and go on out and be his own person, he actually worked in a group called the Queen's Men, which was a traveling theater group sponsored by Queen Elizabeth that would go from town to town all over England, putting on plays about the British history as Queen Elizabeth wanted the British people to think of it. And so even Bill Shakespeare got co-opted by the government to go on out and do some propaganda. And historians and scholars have pointed out areas where Shakespeare's histories are a little self-serving to the British royal family.
Mike, lastly, I've recently been getting into more of the predictive programming type stuff and the desensitization that they want to, by putting this out there with Kathy Griffith, grab the police officers' guns. It seems like now, if something were to happen tomorrow and you got on the radio and you were talking about it, would any of us really be surprised?
Well, I was talking about that all the way back during the campaign, when they were always out there saying, somebody's got to shoot Donald Trump, that it was almost pre-selling the idea as inevitable. But I look at this Shakespeare play, I look at the harassment of Mike Pence by that Broadway show, I look at Kathy Griffin, all as signaling that the left has actually run out of any original political ideas. that they are just out there screaming and crying because they're not the ruling class anymore, but they haven't really brought anything new to the table. It's just out there with, Black Lives Matter and to co-opt the term from Gilad Atzmon, identity politics and the race card and the women's card. They don't actually have any new ideas on how to make this country better. They're just out there screaming about which restroom we're supposed to be using.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch to Anthony in California. Aloha, Anthony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. I just want to make a comment. I don't know. I'd like your opinion about it. It's about the deep state. My feeling is that since Obama signed the NDAA National Defense Authorization Act back in 2012, it gives the FBI, CIA, and NSA the powers to use their fake news outlets for propaganda. And
yes.
since there is this deep state, there are still agents in there within the CIA using these possible fake news outlets to give Donald Trump trouble. What do you think?
Well, I mean, anybody with any wealth or influence or power has always tried to court the corporate media to their particular position. There were originally laws to preserve a diversity of opinion to prevent people with too much wealth and power from skewing the nation against the interest of the general public, but those laws have gone away. Propagandizing the American people used to be illegal, but it was going on anyway. In rescinding those laws, they said it's legal now, but that really has not changed the fact that they've been propagandizing us all along. When they told us that there were torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, for example, that was during a time when it was illegal to use propaganda on the American people. I think the one saving grace right now is that they're doing it very, very badly. When you have Reuters that comes on out directly contradicting what Comey actually said, when you have very sloppy editing of videos, when you catch them on the green screen, people are waking up and realizing that it's all a fairy tale and a fiction. And again, I think the biggest mistake the deep state made was subcontracting, if you will, the Ministry of Propaganda to advertising agencies and public relations firms. Because I worked in advertising many, many years ago, and as institutions, advertising agencies think about, this one campaign. It's going to go for a couple of months, then we wipe the slate clean and we go off with another completely different sales pitch. Same with public relations firms. For propaganda to really work on a population, it has to create a cohesive, consistent, alternate reality with which to place over the real world. It can't self-contradict. It can't be absurd. It can't engage in downright silliness, or it quickly starts to fall apart, and people are saying, we're not getting a real world here. And again, it's not the fault of the ad agencies and the public relations firms. It's just not the way they think. They think in time spans of a few weeks or a couple of months, whereas propagandists have to think in terms of scales of years of maintaining a carefully crafted illusion. And unfortunately, the Nazis were really very good at it, which is why a lot of those people were brought over to the United States in Operation Paperclip. But most of them have now passed on, and that's why the modern political system, they go to these ad agencies and PR firms. And nobody really has a good, solid lock on how to make it work. And that's why we keep tripping over all these absurdities.
Well, what about the NDAA Act that Obama signed, which authorizes the NSA and CIA to use propaganda?
Well, like I said, in terms of the CIA and the NSA and the FBI, they've been using propaganda all along. It was at best a token effort. All it amounted to is that when you catch these outlets lying to you, there's nothing you can do about it legally. And again, it's not even the NDAA. If you go back to that Fox News synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit, where Monsanto was a big advertiser with Fox News, and they told Fox News, you will make this story about our synthetic bovine growth hormone look really good. The reporters had found there were actually some serious health questions about this product, and they put it in their report. Fox News told them to take it out. The reporters refused, and they were fired. And the reporters sued Fox News. Let me finish. The reporters sued Fox News for wrongful termination, and they lost on appeal when the court ruled that because there is no law requiring corporate media to be truthful to the public, the managers of corporate media can order their correspondents and prostitutes to lie to the public, and if they refuse, they can legally be fired. And that tells you all you need to know about the corporate media.
Well, what about the deep state, then, that people talk about in relation to the media?
Well, it's not all that deep. I mean, basically deep state is a label that is applied to this sort of clique that is formed out of the very rich and the very powerful. And it's not like they issue membership cards and badges. You know, I'm a proud member of the deep state. It is simply a generic term for this conspiracy, and that is an accurate word here, between the big banks and big media and big government and big pharma and military-industrial complex to keep things going the way they are right now, to preserve the status quo that benefits them.
Okay, Mike. Thanks a lot, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Fran in Washington State. Aloha, Fran. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Okay. Hey, doesn't it make you wonder, while you're watching all of this dog and pony show, what is it that they don't want us to pay attention to?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot they don't want us paying attention to, like what's going on over in Syria, what's going on over in North Korea, what's going on with the economy especially. A lot of red flags flying over Wall Street right now.
Yeah, and God only knows what else, but this superficial dog and pony show is just ridiculous.
Well, I agree with you.
Sometimes
I agree with you, but this particular dog and pony show is a continuance of the effort to try and convince the American people that there is something evil and nefarious about Donald Trump. It's failing miserably. I mean, coming out of Comey's testimony, polls are showing support for the president is very, very strong, and most people are looking at Comey as being some kind of a dirty hack. And I don't think they're getting out of this hearing with Sessions what they want to get, which is why Cotton is out there saying, well, you know, Trump's people could have, passed information back and forth with the Russians on the subway with a hollowed-out nickel and all the rest of that other nonsense.
Yeah. Okay, Michael, thank you very much.
You're welcome, and we are going to switch over to Kathleen in Paris. Bonjour, mon ami, comment vas-tu?
Je vais bien, merci. Well, I'm not so well, actually. But I want to thank you for your education of us. I like these ads you're doing for RBN, and I did that, and I hope everybody else does it. But yesterday, you really added to my education. I had heard this thing about Sandy Hook being a hoax before, but I thought, what is that, And so, but yesterday, one of your other callers talked about this guy, Wolfgang Halbert.
Yes.
And so today I spent some time searching that information, and I watched a few parts of the videos where he's talking about his investigation or attempt to make an investigation, but he couldn't get any cooperation or information because it's, so shut down. And I have to believe that it was a hoax.
Yes.
And so I'm it's almost like I've learned as much as I can stand to know, about what our government has done. I mean,
that's the end point. That's the end point right there. It's a hoax. You don't need to go any further. You don't need to get busy, debating over minutia, which is a very common propaganda tactic to try and delay the formation of a popular consensus. Okay, we reached the point. The government has lied to us yet again. And we stop. And now we say, what are we going to do about it? And that is true whether it is Sandy Hook, the Boston Marathon bombing, 9/11, Saddam's nuclear weapons, the online informants, activists, paid shills, whatever, will try and get you to argue endlessly over ridiculous issues like was there really a plane at the Pentagon or not, because that ties you up and tires you down. You stop at the point where everybody says the government has lied to us again. What are you going to do about that? Are you willing to live underneath a government that lies to you about virtually everything? And more to the point, are you willing to allow your children to grow up under a government that lies to them about pretty much anything, to get their money, their obedience, to send them off to wars of conquest? It's time for the American people to decide. Are they willing to go along with a government that lies to them on such a horrendous scale? We are the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth.
Well, I agree with that, and I don't have to go any further and listen to any more of the proof or his absent puzzle pieces. But my next thought was, why did they do it? And so in my head, it's the gun grabbers. They want to take away Americans' guns.
That was certainly part of the agenda, no question about that. And it was rather amazing that they kept trying to push gun grab, and when people came on back and said, let's talk about the medications this guy was on, and boy, did they close that down. You never ever question whether that some of these prescription psychiatric medications people are being over-prescribed on are the cause of much of the violence and bizarre behavior we're seeing in our culture right now. Because after all, Big Pharma makes money, and they write very generous campaign donation checks.
Right. Well, thank you for everything.
All right. Well, thank you very much here, and we're going to let you go, Fran. We're going to take a break for some commercials here, and we'll be back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this is what I mean by a hollowed-out nickel. And as you can see, there's Jefferson, and the back is open. And then there's the back of the coin that pops on in. You can hide a micro SD card in there, and they come from a company called SpyCoins.com. They actually have another name, and I just linked to the page. They used to be advertisers at WhatReallyHappened.com, and they are very, very useful for hiding things like your bikini photo collection that you don't think anybody else has a reason to be looking at. So these things are real. They're out there, and they are very, very useful. Okay, so let's see. We're going to go to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you.
Aloha.
In all this conversation about technology and chatting with the commander-in-chief, puppet in charge, whatever name you want to give, whatever. I'm pretty easy with that. If I recall correctly, Obama made the comment when he was, or Serrano, whatever, made the comment about that he wanted people to communicate with him through their BlackBerry or some other sort of high-tech toy or whatever have you, and to let him know what they're thinking or what they would like to see going on or happening to help the people. And now the same thing is going on with Trump. Now, I know I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers with this, and that's fine. What makes people think with either Obama or with Trump that they're actually going to get, if they tweet or send a note BlackBerry-wise or whatever toy they happen to be using, think that they're actually going to get a response back from these two gentlemen, and I'm being polite about that, when they send an electronic note to them. The reason I say that is because obviously most anyone knows that the communications from either of these men are going to be scrutinized by the NSA, among other alphabet soup groups, agencies for that matter. And chances are, let alone staff members would end up doing the responding and not Trump or Obama for that matter.
Well,
whoever sent.
let me share a couple of insights. First of all, the vast majority of that social media traffic directed to Donald Trump is being tallied automatically by software to find out simply what what are people talking about? How many people are talking about the various issues? Now, sharing an insight from my experience in Hollywood, yes, there are staffers, in some cases dedicated companies, where all they do is they deal with all the incoming, whether it's postal mail or electronic mail or tweets or whatever, and they will sift through it. But generally, really unique, insightful, or special things can be forwarded on. I know that in terms of celebrities, the rules are generally, if they're just asking for an autographed picture, just send it back to them and I don't want to see it. But if it's a personal request like, I would like you to come to the Make-A-Wish Foundation and stuff, that stuff actually will get forwarded on to give the person an opportunity to maybe do something about that. Anyway, listen. Okay, Francis, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 2. Now, getting on back to Megyn Kelly and her interview with Putin, which didn't get the results she wanted, and her interview with Alex Jones, which has produced a huge backlash. On top of all of that, Megyn Kelly has turned out to be an absolute ratings disaster for NBC. And apparently people just aren't tuning in. I mean, some tuned in for Putin, but they're not getting their money's worth out of her. They paid her $15 million for this, and her numbers are just not good. Meanwhile, you remember when former FBI Director James Comey testified under oath before the Senate Intelligence Committee that a February 14th story run by the New York Slimes implying collusion between Team Trump and the Russians was dead wrong. Somebody just went over to their website. The New York Slimes has not corrected the story yet. Once we tell you a lie, the lie will stand. Now, over at the Gateway Pundit, they're running a story that apparently there is going to be a shakeup in the White House staff, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to permanently replace Sean Spicer as the White House press secretary, and supposedly this is coming from Spicer himself. Now, I say that with the following caveat. There's been a lot of rumor mongering about White House staffing changes, and it doesn't always work out. So we'll wait and see, but that's the latest that's coming out from there. Let's go back to the phones. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, that one caller that called in about the Dog and Pony show. It truly is for entertainment purposes only.
I don't find it entertaining at all,
Well, okay, but I'll make my comment that everybody that you see on TV at that level knows that Trump couldn't build a casino in Nevada because he's got some nefarious characters behind him. So if they run into any sparklers, it's just going to be shoved underneath the desk. They don't want to know anything, So that's that's my comment for today, Mike. Thanks.
Well, again, the opening statements in the hearings was basically, yes, Russia massively interfered with our election, and that's a given, and we will allow no challenges to that. And that tells you right there, it's pure politics, it's pure propaganda, it's not really an investigation, and it is. It's a witch hunt and a hatchet job against Trump by the entrenched narcocracy. And that's really where the lines are breaking down. In fact, I don't even like to use the phrase deep state. This is the narcocracy, and everybody who's profited from it against the possibility of a government that might say, you guys really were breaking the law, and maybe it's time for you to stop. So, all right, well, Rick, thank you very much for the phone call. And let's see, Sessions is out there saying that the suggestion he colluded with the Russians is an appalling and detestable lie. Yes, it is. So this is going to be going on for a little bit longer. Okay, getting on back to the news, let's turn to the war zones, and there are so many of them, and they are breeding like flies out there. Syrian troops are moving closer to Raqqa, and again, the U.S. appears to be dropping chemical weapons on the city, and by that we mean the white phosphorus. Now, the white phosphorus weapons, again, they are banned under international law. And when Saddam used white phosphorus on the Kurds, the United States was the first to denounce him for daring to use this weapon. And once again, we're seeing this attitude of it's only bad when the other guys do it. When we do it, it's really okay. We're masking our forces, from 8,000 feet in the air. The way a standard Willie Pete munition works is there are these large felt pads inside that are soaked with the white phosphorus solution. And on detonation, they fan on out, and the higher it is detonated from, the wider the area they come on down, and every single one of those pads will start fires on the ground. And that's why they are banned for use over residential areas. If they hit a human being, the white phosphorus will literally burn into their skin right down to the bone, and you cannot put the fire out. If you throw water on it, it's actually going to burn more fiercely. It is an horrific weapon. Ron Paul is out there asking a very legitimate question. Why is the U.S. government attacking the Syrians who are currently fighting ISIS? Which side is the U.S. government on? Well, we know from documents that came on out from the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton's State Department that ISIS is actually working for the United States government inside Syria. And there was this smuggling operation to take weapons that had been used in Libya to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi and smuggle them into Syria into the hands of ISIS. So yes, the U.S. government, even as they're insisting to you that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are terrorist groups and they are bad people that we must destroy, they're working together against Bashar al-Assad. We're going to do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. But Ron Paul is correct. What we're getting is the government that says one thing, we're after ISIS, and what they're doing is very different. They're attacking the Syrians who are fighting ISIS. Now, as you know, the U.S. has attacked 3 separate times on the Syrian forces. And all 3 times it was done in order to prevent an encirclement of ISIS forces, to blow a hole in the line of encirclement, allowing the ISIS terrorists a route of escape. And Russia has now issued a warning that the U.S. should not attack any more Syrian-aligned troops. This is coming from Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. They're drawing a line in the sand and moving us one step closer to direct military confrontation between U.S. forces and Russian forces, and I think that's a bad idea. But unfortunately, I'm not in control of our U.S. war policy. Even more alarming is a story that we got out of Sputnik News. Is the U.S. preparing for Assad's removal amid strikes on Damascus allies? And according to Sputnik News, the U.S. government is preparing a large-scale operation aimed directly at Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in order to replace him with a pro-American puppet regime. This is what they've been trying to do for over 5 years. And reading in this article, it looks like they're considering a decapitation strike. Now, that would set a very, very bad precedent. In the modern age of war, where the leaders of countries stay at home in their bunkers and safe, it's considered bad form to go after each other's rulers, primarily out of concern that a headless military might overreact and do something very, very dangerous or nuclear. That's been the rule up until now. But we know the U.S. government is just flagrantly violating international rule, conventions, and so forth. And they were talking about a decapitation strike against Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Now they're talking about a decap strike on Assad in Syria. And that, of course, opens up the possibility of some other nation trying a decapitation strike on the United States government itself, which would be a shame. There's a lot of really good museums in Washington, D.C. that I've never had a chance to visit, and I'd like to someday. But it's very, very dangerous. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to put up an answer to the question that Ron Paul posed. Why are we in Syria attacking Assad rather than ISIS? And it's the same answer that I would give you for why were we in Iraq, why were we in Libya, why are we now in Syria, and that is because Israel and her fifth columnists who dictate our Middle Eastern foreign policy which then dictates the rest of our foreign policy, told us to do it.
Well, that's definitely one reason. That's definitely one reason. But again, do not fall into the trap of thinking that every war and every assassination has only one cause behind it. It is often presented that way in the history books and on movies and TV, but it doesn't really work that way. What happens is you'll have a group of entities, individuals, institutions, governments, who all have their own particular agenda, but they all can be solved with a war or an assassination, and that's when it moves forward and it happens. Yes, Israel's putting pressure on the U.S. government to make war on these countries, but there's also the economic aspect of coercing these nations to sell their oil only for the U.S. dollar. In many cases, there are natural resources that U.S. corporations covet. One of the reasons we're still in Afghanistan is because it's a huge source of lithium, which recently has become very, very important for batteries and so forth. There's always going to be an overlap of multiple agendas, but there is no question that Israel is definitely pushing their pet Congress critters to agitate for more war.
Well, let me give you two examples that would tell you that they are the true movers and shakers here. And Afghanistan's a little far afield for them, although they like us being in Afghanistan because it outflanks Iran for them. And, of course, they want us to go to Iran, too. That's our next step. But the first one is, of course, nobody else had the agenda on the Liberty, and nobody else could get that covered up or had the juice or the interest in covering up, but Israel and her lobby. The next one is, what about a couple weeks ago when Trump, after saying 45 times he would not bomb Syria, didn't want to go into Syria. Remember when he did the initial bombing strike with all the missed cruise missiles?
Yeah, but that was in response to the false flag gas attack at Idlib.
Well, but Michael, the deal is that everybody knows who controls the media. It's the Jews, the Israelis, basically. At least the Jews do. But they were trumpeting him. They went from wanting to impeach him to 100%. We're with you on bombing Syria. Nobody else told them to do that. That's their part and parcel of the whole problem as well.
Well, Peter, I will grant you they're a major part of the problem with the war agenda. I will grant you that Israel has a hugely disproportionate influence over our government to the exclusion of the American people. But I think you're looking at these events in far too simplistic a manner to really comprehend what's going on. But yes, there's no question. Israel's influence over our government is a threat to our nation in terms of a nation that serves we the people. There's no question about that. And it is very hypocritical for everybody to be out there screaming about Russia trying to interfere in our internal politics. At the same time, the doors are wide open for Israel to do precisely that.
And Mike, let me make the point here also. I talked about the media and I talked about the Israeli lobby, but your argument on the petrodollar, which I agree with, which the petrodollar is a cause, but even those bankers, look who they are. I mean, look who they are as well. It's all an integrated thing in my mind. But the bankers, the media, the Israeli lobby, they're the same thing. They overlap to a huge degree.
Agreed. I agree with you on that one. Okay?
That's why I love you, Mike. All right, man. Thank you.
All right, Peter, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. Now, interestingly enough, there's yet another terrorist group that is offering to join the Syrian opposition coalition if the price is right. And this is, I've never actually even heard of these people before. The Army of Islam is asking for $1 million a month to join the coalition of the opposition in Syria. Doesn't really sound like a group of terrorists. It sounds more like a mercenary army with a media-worthy name, the Army of Islam. So, meanwhile, over in Iran, the head of Strategic Research Center of Iran's Expediency Council, Ali Akbar Velayati, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, is basically saying that Iran is not going to tolerate Saudi's warmongering any longer. And so it sounds to me like Saudi Arabia is going to be the proxy to launch the long-desired war against Iran, so that U.S. politicians will be able to turn to you and say, we had nothing to do with it. We had nothing to do with Yemen. This is a regional conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We certainly didn't want this, but we have to come to the aid of Saudi Arabia. And again, that will put us in opposition to Russia. And I'm seeing a dangerous circumstance where everybody is looking at the immediate war they are pushing for and lobbying for, and nobody is really willing to widen their view to just how close we are to a real world war that could very easily go nuclear. And my analysis has been for a very, very long time that on the day when the United States finds itself mired in too many wars, in too many lands, and cannot win conventionally, and they aren't winning conventionally in Afghanistan and so many other places, they will resort to the nuclear arsenal. And it's going to be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. Meanwhile, Charles Schumer is coming out opposed to Donald Trump's arms sale to Saudi Arabia, and basically saying that Saudi Arabia is supporting terrorist groups via its relationship with Wahhabism. Now, I have a feeling Chuck Schumer's real agenda here is that Israel is very, very nervous about Saudi Arabia closing the military gap. And this is where Mideast politics becomes very, very complicated. According to a story that came out of Press TV, the United Arab Emirates financed the failed coup attempt last year against Erdogan in Turkey, and apparently they paid about $3 billion. This is coming out of a Turkish newspaper today. And once again, the United States is trying to provoke Russia by flying nuclear-capable bombers toward the Russian border and over in the Baltics, and it was 2 B-1B Lancer bombers and 1 B-52N bomber. Now, the U.S. is saying it's a routine mission in the Baltic. Russia is denouncing it as an obvious provocation because the bombers keep flying toward the Russian border and they turn back only at the last second. Now, part of it's a provocation. The other part of it may be that the U.S. is trying to probe Russia's air defenses to see how quickly the radars come on, how quickly the targeting radars come on. And on the other side, I imagine that Russia is probably not revealing their latest and greatest, because Russia understands the one area where they have superiority over the United States is in electronic warfare. And so they're not going to be turning on the really new, really good stuff until they absolutely have to. In fact, I would speculate that when that Russian aircraft paralyzed the Donald Cook over and over and over and over again, they were probably using some of their older systems. Now, U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis is out there once again screaming that North Korea is the most urgent threat to our security because of their nuclear development and their missile development. I mean, how dare they prepare to defend themselves when we invade? Don't they understand the rules we just made up? When the U.S. invades you, you just roll over and go belly up and let us come on in and do whatever we want. Remember, the United States technically is still in a state of war with North Korea. And we've all been hearing all this belligerent talk about North Korea this and North Korea that, and North Korea is the threat. North Korea has a right to prepare to defend themselves against an attack. And the idea of having a nuclear-tipped ICBM is as a deterrent, that if you invade my country, bad things are going to happen to your country. Have you ever heard the United States government say that our ICBMs, our Minutemen, our Tridents, are weapons of aggression and attack? No, we're always saying it's for our defense, it's for deterrence, even though the United States is the only country that's ever actually used a nuclear weapon on the civilians of another country. Now, I would love to see a world where all nuclear weapons are banned. It is impossible. The genie is out of the bottle, the cat is out of the bag. The only other way to maintain peace is for all nations to have ICBMs and nuclear weapons. And then everybody else is going to leave them alone. By the way, the USS Carl Vinson that was over there by North Korea is due into here at Pearl Harbor sometime tomorrow. and I'll be looking out the window to see when it does show up. So at least as far as the Carl Vinson, that part has pulled back. Maybe it's a de-escalation, although I understand the Nimitz is now on its way out to that area as well. We're going to take a break here for some commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We've got an update on this story coming out of the White House. Apparently, Sean Spicer is being promoted to the Director of Communications. So he is actually moving up. He's not leaving the White House, and that's why Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to take over as the White House press secretary. So I thought Spicer was doing a really good job, and obviously this promotion is something that's going to be good for him and good for the Trump White House. Now, getting on back to this idea of all the wars going on, Putin has responded to the threat from North Korea by deploying their anti-missile system in eastern Siberia. And they're putting out the Book M3, which has absolutely no match among Western armaments. This is the best of their best out there, and they're saying it's there to prevent North Korea from firing missiles at them. I don't think so. We understand the reason the U.S. is trying to put these terminal high-altitude area defense missiles all over Asia and into Europe is to act as an anti-missile shield in the event of an ICBM exchange with Russia. And now Russia is going to do exactly the same thing, put the Book M3s all along their side of the border to possibly foil an incoming U.S. missile strike. So this thing is all ramping up here. Everybody's getting ready to push that button and hope for the best. And I got to tell you, I don't know what the practices are in the testing of Russia's military weapons. But looking at how rigged the testing of U.S. weapons systems has been to make them look good and worth the money, and then you get on out there in the real world, in real combat, and they fail miserably, I really have little confidence of the survivability of a nuclear war. Now, a little bit of good news out of North Korea. There was an American named Otto Warmbier, who was a student, and he was arrested for anti-state activities. Actually, he was a suspected spy, and he was sentenced to 15 years at hard labor. And apparently, coincident with Dennis Rodman paying a return visit to Pyongyang, North Korea has now released the student, and Tillerson is out there preening and trying to take credit for it. So that worked. Maybe things are backing off. And by the way, somebody just sent me an email saying the Ronald Reagan is actually on its way back to Australia. So maybe they're pulling off from that. And Mattis is just smoking opium out there screaming about North Korea, North Korea. Getting on down to Israel and Palestine, things in Gaza are going from bad to worse. As you may already be aware, Israel has cut electricity going into Gaza severely. And now they're going to cut it back even more, cutting it back by 40%, turning an already dire situation into a catastrophe. And prior to this cut, Gaza only got electricity for 4 hours a day. And this made life very difficult for hospitals, which only have so much fuel for their emergency generators, the desalinization and sewage treatment plants. And because of Egypt's crackdown on the cross-border tunnels, the Gazans aren't able to bring in more fuel for the generators that they do have. So this is collective punishment of a captive population, which, by the way, is a war crime. So let's talk about America's weapons system. As we reported yesterday, all of the F-35 fighters at the Luke Air Force Base in Arizona were grounded following multiple complaints by the pilots of hypoxia, meaning that at altitude they were not getting the oxygen needed for their brains to work. Now, fortunately, there is an emergency oxygen system in the cockpit that the pilots were able to turn on and land safely. And apparently, they're not able to identify what the problem is, and they can't confirm that it is only those particular F-35s at Luke Air Force Base. So what had started out as a temporary grounding of the F-35s is now extended indefinitely. And if you go back and you look at the F-22 and how they still have not solved that problem with asphyxiating its pilots, boy, oh boy, that's, for all that money, they do not work. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and let's talk about the economic news. As we mentioned earlier in the week, actually yesterday, Friday's NASDAQ had a bit of a downturn, and it's looking like there may be trouble in the tech sector, mostly because people don't have the money to buy the latest and greatest whiz-bang. As long as their existing smartphones, tablets, and laptops are working, they're happy to hang on to them. This idea of planned obsolescence, of getting people to buy a new phone or a tablet every 3 to 5 years, it works in a healthy economy when people are able to earn decent wages and salaries. It doesn't work in an economy where people are just barely able to pay their bills, and the sales numbers are showing it. So basically, Apple fell 2.5% after Mizuho Securities cut its rating on the tech giant to neutral from buy. This is the second downgrade in a week. Netflix dropped 4.2%, Amazon lost 1.4%, Alphabet dropped 0.9%, Facebook down 0.8%. Now, the harsh reality is, despite all the media propaganda about the recovery this and unemployment that, the reality is right now in the United States, 72% of all businesses are not showing any profit at all. They're treading water, or they are failing. And we are still seeing more and more retail chains are going into bankruptcy or restructuring, and they're closing retail outlets. Meanwhile, over in Europe, they have fallen into the instant money trap the way the U.S. has, and the European Central Bank is printing millions of euros trying to prop up the Eurozone until 2019, and I'm not sure why they're having that particular deadline. But remember, when they started with TARP and bailouts and quantitative easing, we were told those were simply temporary measures and everything was going to be just hunky-dory after that. Didn't work out. Once you start trying to inflate the debt away, you are stuck. You're going to wind up in Zimbabwe territory. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. The next financial crisis has already arrived in Europe, and people, at least in Europe, are starting to freak out. Hasn't really sunk in here at the United States just yet. They think there's an ocean that's protecting them, but it isn't, due to economic globalism. And we're talking, of course, about the 6th largest bank in Spain failed in spectacular fashion a few days ago. And a lot of people are comparing the sudden implosion of Banco Popular to the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. And EU regulators hastily arranged a sale of the failed bank to Santander in order to avoid a full-scale financial panic. But it's a stopgap measure. And Americans should be paying attention, because remember, in 2008, it was because of economic globalism, of no controls over the borders, of everybody buying each other's derivatives, that the meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud on Wall Street spread to Europe and almost destroyed many of the banks over there. And there were all these funny stories about gold certificates being moved around and a lot of obviously panic behavior trying to keep things looking good here. Story out of sovereignman.com. Banks are becoming less safe again. And basically it's talking about data showing a simple but concerning trend. Banks in the United States are becoming less safe. And that is followed up by an article out of Goldcore saying, "In gold we trust." And they have a bunch of charts and research. Apparently gold prices are going up again, despite the best efforts to dilute them with the paper contracts. And investors are wising up. They're understanding those contracts. You're not going to get gold. If you contract for gold with those contracts, you may not get the gold. The laws concerning these particular commodities were changed, where the gold brokerages now have the option. When that contract comes due, they don't have to give you the gold you contracted for. They can give you its cash equivalent. Well, the whole point of holding gold is to not see its value inflated away. And if they give you a big stack of ink and paper, it's going to start losing its value to inflation. There's almost no point in buying a gold contract if you're not actually going to get the gold. And they're still pouring those gold contracts out there because it's the only device they have to keep gold prices down, and the same thing's being done with the silver market. In fact, all the precious metals out there. Everybody listening to this show ought to have some silver and gold as wealth preservation. Buy it in small amounts in order to avoid a lot of records being kept of it, and keep it under your own control. Don't even put it in your safety deposit box, because the laws of the United States were changed. If the banks get into trouble, they are now allowed to loot your safety deposit box of valuables in order to put on their balance sheet and keep themselves solvent. The laws have clearly moved away from protecting the bank customer to protecting the banks themselves. Because in the eyes of the U.S. government, you human beings are absolutely worthless other than as a source of labor and new soldiers and new workers, and the banks must be preserved at all costs. And it's not exactly a new attitude. We saw the same thing back in the 1930s with gold confiscation. Now, Putin is meeting with Ethereum to create a Russian national virtual currency. And they're bringing in the blockchain technology. The Bank of Russia has already set up an experimental link with some of the banks in Europe to test it out and get it working. And Ethereum is coming on as a strong challenger to Bitcoin. And again, I think virtual currencies are definitely a way to go, but I do not think they should be a replacement for cash, because all computers break down, and we've already had a couple of nasty stories about people who are dependent on cards not being able to eat. Whether it was this listener who wrote in about how all the card machines in her supermarket quit working and nobody could check out, and that story we ran yesterday about how the food stamp system down in Georgia, for some reason, the cards were all empty. They didn't have the proper allocated amount of money in there, and people couldn't get food for their families. So I don't see cash as going away. Besides which, what would the politicians stick in the G-strings of the strippers if they outlawed cash? Let's get real here. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Lenny in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I want to talk about the economy. A few days ago, you posted on your site, and like I said, I can only call in today, but you posted on your site about Jim Cramer screaming his head off about recommending the people buy Bitcoin, even though it's already seems about as high as it can go. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but he was screaming his head off to the people about buying Lehman Brothers right before it crashed.
I remember. That was a huge, huge embarrassment. And again, the question was, did he hold a lot of Lehman Brothers stock? Was he trying to drive it up so that he could get out and get his money out? I really think these financial reporters on all these networks, I think the public has a right to know where their money is invested, because obviously it's going to influence their reporting. They're going to be pushing the stocks that they're holding that they want to see grow, or they may be attacking stocks that are a threat to the stocks they hold, and the possibility for less than wonderful accurate reporting needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and here's the thing. What I like to see you do, there's a clip when Jon Stewart took him on for doing it. Jon Stewart accused him of being on the tape, okay? And he took him on the Daily Show about what he did. And Jim Cramer apologized. I won't do it. I won't do it again. I wouldn't do that again. But here he is doing it again. So if you can post, what he said a few days ago, and post what Jon Stewart taking him on back in 2009, I think it would be a great comparison for people to see. Also, I remember watching him right after that, and the so-called money honeys, who he would, Maria Bartolomo, and I forget who the other two were, they flat out asked him, well, Jim, what are you buying? I mean, what are you buying? And he quickly said, gold, and then moved quickly away from it. If you can find that one and throw it up there too.
I'll have to hunt that down here. I mean, first of all, I personally don't have the money to be investing in the stock market, and if I did, I still wouldn't invest in the stock market. I did try investing in gold coins a while back, and then I made the mistake of eating the chocolate bit out of the middle, which, as I understand it, totally destroys its resale value. So that's where I'm coming on that. But yeah, I'll hunt that down, especially the Jon Stewart clip on there. I mean, when Jon Stewart was still at the helm of The Daily Show, I absolutely loved it, and I absolutely no interest in watching the show now.
Neither do I. And but the thing is that here's the great thing about these crooks. We have the ability, like you said, now with all this technology. See, they put it out there. They used it. They figured they would use it to spy on us, but they never figured that some of us will be smart enough to use it against them. Okay, so now we can go out and grab this stuff of them contradicting themselves, them flat out lying about what they're doing.
That's one of the most powerful things that you can do, and it's been amazing. I've seen a lot of people putting together these pages about all the statements that were made about the Russian collusion, where CNN is saying one thing one day, and then 2 days later they're saying the exact opposite. And it's very important to put those comparisons together and get them out to the public eye so that they can see how much the corporate media is in fact compromised.
Yeah, and I know you're in Clara business, so I'm urging the listeners that are listening, from this conversation, do your homework and help Mike out. Send him this stuff so, he can take pressure off himself and get this stuff up so the people can see. There are people listening all over the world. But if we keep lighting the fire, we keep, in reference to a biblical story, when Samson set the fox's tail on fire, everywhere the fox ran in the field, he set the field on fire and burned them down. So through the information, we can just burn up the falsetto or the false appearance of what they're trying to throw to us every day. So I'm just saying, let's help each other out here.
Well, thank you very much. That's good information. I'm definitely going to want to hunt down that Jon Stewart video. But you're right. Kramer ran up Lehman Brothers and then it collapsed. Now he's screaming about Bitcoin at $1 million. I don't see that as actually happening. Absence of nefarious manipulation.
Yeah, whether it does or not, are you going to trust him this time after what he did to the people the last time? He screamed, buy Lehman Brothers. And I'm telling you, by Monday, Friday, he said buy, and by that Monday, it crashed.
Well, I will not watch Jim Cramer after what he did to Iron Man, so that's the end of that story.
All right, man. Have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Glenn in Philadelphia. Glenn, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Hi.
Hi.
This falls under the heading of things I've been wrong about all my life.
Yes.
Anyway, that Julius Caesar, in the play Julius Caesar, a lot of times that scene where the senators are stabbing him and then Brutus also stabs him and Caesar says, "Et tu, Brute?" You too, Brutus? Is used as an example of a wicked betrayal. But I heard a literature professor clarify this one time a couple of years ago, where I thought it was interesting. Caesar considered Brutus his mentor and his confidant and advisor, and trusted his judgment implicitly. And so this is why Julius Caesar says, he just says, "Et tu, Brute," and then so if you see fit for Caesar to die, then let Caesar die. In other words, he's deferring to his judgment even when he's turned on him, which I thought was fascinating. That kind of explains why he says, then let Caesar die.
I've heard that analysis myself as well.
Yeah, I just think that's interesting because we go around with all these ideas about what things mean, and then here it is. It's like, I thought it was like the other way around, like my whole life. The other thing I wanted to mention was this thing with the F-35. I'm wondering if maybe somebody didn't finally get around to turning on a back door in one of the chips for the F-35. They did the F-22s early on, and this idea of using all these foreign-made electronics in these planes and stuff is just crazy.
I agree. So, I agree, whether they're made in China or made in Israel. There are rumors going on around that Israel managed to hack the electronics of the S-300 and S-400, and that's why Israel's planes are able to fly over Syria with impunity.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. But, so what, one last thought about the cryptocurrencies. You know, people say don't buy certificates or paper gold or whatever because it's worth precisely the paper it's printed on and nothing more. Well, if that be the case, how much less can vaporware such as Bitcoin be trusted? I mean, I remember there was a Bitcoin crisis where a bunch of Bitcoin got, ripped off or disappeared or something like that. And now they're floating all these other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, and every day I go on blogs and see about some new whiz-bang, get on the ground floor, cryptocurrency. It's like, I'm thinking this is just a mass, this is just siphoning money off from people, and then poof, the vaporware disappears somewhere in the ether.
Yeah, there's a big scandal going on about Coinbase right now. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the show. And I agree, a currency that is that virtual can easily be manipulated, easily be hacked. I think that any monetary system that is not tied to a commodity base of known, recognized value is doomed to ultimately fail through inflation, through manipulation, and we need to go back to that commodity base. Now, the commodity has to be available in ample enough supply where it can't be hoarded and monopolized, and it has to be able to grow in volume with the population, which is why I think that we ought to think about tying currency to a unit of electricity, a kilowatt hour. And I actually wrote a paper on that talking about the electro as a unit of currency. And it can be tokenized in order to have a currency or a cryptocurrency, but it's tied to a commodity base, which makes it much more difficult to inflate and to manipulate.
Yeah, but one good coronal mass ejection and poof, but I prefer precious metals such as lead and brass. But,
well,
right.
you're right about the coronal mass ejection or, a gamma ray burst, and we don't have to worry about any of this stuff anymore. All right, well, listen.
I liked Hitler's idea of an hour of labor. An hour of labor. I thought that was a good one.
Yeah,
anyway.
and
Mike, thank you.
It wasn't really held to that, but it was something that gave it a solid base on which to build. And it worked, of course. It worked, the German miracle. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take another phone call. Kevin in West Virginia, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike, how are you today?
I'm hanging in there.
All right. Well, I was watching the Sessions testimony today, and, of course, that ended up being a big nothing burger with a couple bombshells dropped by Sessions, with saying how Comey perjured himself and stuff. But here's my question, a couple questions, actually. My first one would be, could you imagine if they could get Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and, what's the other one? Well, at least those two, in the exact same setting as they had Senator Sessions in today? Could you imagine what could come out of that?
It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
No, it'll never happen.
You need to understand with the narcocracy, almost everybody inside that beltway is part of it. That's why they all viewed Donald Trump as such a threat. Remember, there was this anonymous FBI agent, one of the people who was very much angry at the way Comey was protecting Hillary, was out there posting on various message boards. The Clinton Foundation was a giant slush fund, tax avoidance scheme, money laundering, and almost anybody of any name in Washington, D.C. were taking part in it. So they're all dirty with it. And we're seeing the double standards already. They're going to go after Trump and his people hammer and tong. But when they were talking with any of Hillary's people, it was all softball questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this has gone completely bizarre. And I only live like an hour outside of D.C., hour and a half. I mean, I don't go down there because I'm District of Criminals, of course. But I'm 32 years old. I'm young. I want to start running for office. I mean, I'm not going to sell out or anything like that, but, I want to try to make a change. Is that the right thing to do? And how does one go about doing that?
Well, right now, again, going back to that little blurb about supporting RBN, our most potent weapon is information, and getting that information out to the ordinary American people to basically wake them up to the fact that they have spent most of their life being lied to by the government, by the corporate media, by corporations in general, and they need to come to terms with the sheer scale of the lies. We're the most lied to people on the face of the earth, and now we're beginning to realize it. And people are turning away from the government. They're turning away from the corporate media. Polls are showing record low levels of trust in government and corporate media, and they're coming over here to the independent media, which is why there's now literally a war being declared on us, trying to go after our advertisers, go after our web servers. The Washington Post declared us all arms of Russian propaganda, which we have on a coffee mug around here somewhere. And, but that's really what's going on out here. And again, there's a strong parallel with what was going on when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing. And all those established power centers all of a sudden felt a threat because they were losing control over what people were thinking. And we're going through that in the United States again today. Anyway, Kevin, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, take a break for station identification, back with a couple more phone calls, and then we're going to get back to the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and quite a few of the listeners have already sent in the URL for that video clip of Jon Stewart taking on Jim Cramer. We've got it posted to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, so thanks to everybody who stepped on up, and we've got that now. Somebody else sent me in a list of stories showing how all of these electronic payment systems are subject to massive failures. And they're talking about how in May of this year, system outage leaves Starbucks unable to take payments or customers. Over in Louisiana, they had a food stamp glitch that literally put unlimited funds on all the cards, and everybody just emptied the stores out. They're still trying to figure out who's going to pay for that one. Sainsbury's IT glitch spoils bank holiday food orders. Remember, the British Airways canceled the flights after the IT outage, and it turned out the problem was they had offshored their IT management to a company in India, and the staff in India didn't know how to boot up the backup system when the primary one went down. Let's see. British Airways outage creates London travel cost. Glitch that froze food stamp purchases fixed. That was 2013. On and on and on. Computer glitch cancels food stamps. Voucher system crashes in several states. And it just goes on. These systems are not perfect. And that is why, even if you want the convenience of an electronic system, I think it is way too soon to talk about a cash-free society with a system that is this fragile, that is prone to breakdown, that is prone to hacking. Meanwhile, in the middle of all this diplomatic crisis, Qatari's currency has hit a 19-year low. You have places like Bahrain talking about freezing assets. Although it does look like that situation may be defusing because of all the countries that indicated support, such as Turkey, Iran, and Russia. And so that flashpoint may back down a bit. But the problem is, every time the war hawks get pushed off a potential flashpoint, they just cook up another one. Go to North Korea, that's not working. Let's go to Qatar, that's not working. Let's go back to Syria, that's not working. Oh, let's start a new one over in Sudan. We'll do that one. Just anywhere they can get the war going. And what all of us need to be doing, every moment of our waking lives, is just sharing with each other enough of war. We have been in the current state of war against all these nations longer than we were in World War I and World War II. You can walk down the street of any town in the country and see the effects of being in a wartime economy, with all the failed retail spaces, the homeless, the hungry, the deteriorated infrastructure. It is a mess out there, and I know that Donald Trump wants to revive our economy, lower taxes, increase spending, but he's got nothing to work with because there's nothing left in the Treasury but debt. And anything he does adds more debt to it. If Trump really wants to drain the swamp and shake things up, he needs to do what Andrew Jackson did. shut down that private central bank, and put us back on an honest monetary system. Very alarming article. This came out of Zero Hedge. Nobody in power is paying attention to just how close we are to the edge. Everybody's just looking at their own gain, their own greed. They're not paying attention to what's around them. And we're all victimized by a system that concentrated personal wealth for a few and left the rest of the population drowning in obligations from a stolen future, and that future is now on us. They can't kick that can any further down the road. They've kicked it so far down the road it looks like an old crumpled gum wrapper at this point. Citi is issuing a warning over the Treasury yield curve slumping to 8-month lows. They're claiming it's a curve inversion, which is considered a warning sign here. Now, the story out of Blacklisted News, we're seeing the dead giveaways of a decline of empire. And again, the parallels between the current United States and Imperial Rome, which was destroyed by internal debt and corruption, which left it weak and vulnerable to the Visigoths. All right, we're going to take some more phone calls. Mark in Wyoming, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind today?
Mr. Rivero, I just wanted to go back to your discussion about people being able to afford new phones and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Let me tell you a quick story of what happened today. My Galaxy S6 was not connecting properly, was hardly connecting at all. So I take it into the Sprint store, and I said, one of the things I said to him is, well, usually I take the battery out and let it reset. He says, you can't remove the battery. I said, well, what do I do if I need a new battery? He says, you have to buy a new phone. Then he starts to try to sell me a new phone for $750. And I said, well, I don't want a new phone. He said, well, you're not going to have much of a choice here pretty soon because it's dying. It's less than 2 years old.
Well, two things there. Now, I don't know about the Galaxy X6, but my wife currently has a Galaxy Note 4, and you can take the back off of that, and you can replace the battery. And I know that because we got her one of those wireless charging systems to make it easier for her to charge the phone. And I just took the back off and put the little induction coil in there. There's a slot for it. And that may not apply to the other Galaxies, but the reason I'm scratching my head over this, do you remember the original iPod from Apple? And it came on out, and it had a problem with its battery failing very, very quickly, and Apple's attitude was the same thing. It was impossible to open and replace the battery. You've got to buy a new one. There was actually a massive lawsuit filed on that, which led to this idea that, yeah, you should be able to replace the battery, and in their later units, yes, you can pop the back off and you can put a new battery in there. We're starting to see a lot of states pass right to repair laws, saying that no products can be sold in the state unless it's possible to repair them rather than force people to buy a new one. But of course, you know, the staff at the cell phone stores, they're not interested in replacing a battery. They're on commission. They need to sell you a new phone. Now, I know on my iPhone it's impossible to get in there and replace the battery, but at this point, Apple seems to have come up with a battery that really is going to survive the life of the phone. I'm very happy with this iPhone 5. I've had it for a long, long time, and it's still working absolutely fine. And I know eventually it'll give up the ghost and I'll be forced to buy a new one. But the business model of these companies wasn't have a new one to sell when the customer needs one. It was always find a way to force the customer to buy a new one every few years. We certainly saw that with Microsoft, with this constantly updating versions of Windows, and we won't support the old one. We remember the heavy-handed tactics trying to get us on Windows 10. And, of course, every time you update the operating system on your computer, it forces you to buy the upgraded version of all your applications, which in a production environment like ours, that is a huge, huge amount of money, which is why we stayed with XP as long as we possibly could. Now we're on Windows 7. I'm not going to buy a new computer. I'm buying these refurbished Windows 7 machines off of eBay, and they're actually very inexpensive. And I got a Dell for the Claire's Choir, 4-core CPU, Windows 7. It's a really nice little machine. I'm very happy with it. I don't need Windows 10. We tried Windows 10. It was an absolute disaster. But the whole attitude is grind as much money out of the people as you can, and it doesn't matter if they're happy or healthy or even productive as long as we get our cash now. And we're seeing more and more of that in the medical industrial complex, which we're going to be getting into here before the end of the show.
Right. And I agree. I have software that runs my office, and I just go to a place down in Denver, that sells refurbished computers for $150. They're brand new, basically, and they run my old software, which runs better than the new software. But, you know, I used to open these phones up all the time and replace the batteries. You cannot get into this phone. There's no way to get into it.
All right, well, like I said, I don't know that particular model, but I don't know on the Galaxy Note 4, the back just pops right off because that's how I put in the little charging pad accessory. All right, Mark, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates. And we're going to do a couple more phone calls, and then we're going to go ahead and close the lines because I do have a lot of news to get to. Doreen in Vancouver, aloha. What is on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Mike. You do a wonderful job.
Thank you.
I'm really interested in your show every day. What I wanted to say was I was on Jason Goodman, Crowdsource the Truth, and he was interviewing Robert David Steele, and he had some fantastic ideas on taking a bus and going around the country, coming this July, and then he was said he could have Americans could buy the country back for $250,000. Also, he had quite a lot to say about Mike Pence and
okay,
the
well,
rest of them.
let's halt right here because I have a response to that. It is true that under the charter for the Federal Reserve, Congress has the right to cancel the charter whenever they want, and the only obligation is that the U.S. government return to the owners of the Federal Reserve the money that was initially loaned to the U.S. government at the creation of the Federal Reserve, and in this day and age, it's not a lot of money. I think it's something like $1 billion. The problem is it has to be approved by Congress, and Congress will never say no to the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve is one of the biggest donors to political campaigns. And I really think that in the project, the Blueprint for the New America, that we need to go back to those laws saying that corporations, which are not people, are not allowed to donate to political campaigns. Let's return to the grassroots here. But I think our current society, our current government is irredeemably past the point of return, and we're just going to have to let it crash and learn the harsh lessons from that as we build a new country in its place. And as you know, Oliver Stone just did this series with Vladimir Putin, where Oliver Stone is saying it's very obvious going around Russia today, life is much better for the Russians following the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I think we've got that to look forward to here in the United States.
Okay, thank you very much. You give lots of information, and that's the point, to get it around. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you very much. We're going to take one more phone call from Alex in Florida, and then we're going to close the lines. Alex, what's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I'm concerned that Trump may not order investigations to uncover things like unmasking American citizens in a FISA warrant and things like that, for the concern that it could make the whole government collapse. And I'm calling just to make a point that if he doesn't allow people to see truth, I'm disappointed in him. I think he sucks. I want a president that's going to say, this is the truth, whatever the consequences are, that's it, so be it.
We would like that as well, and there's a lot Trump has done that I'm very disappointed in, like that cruise missile attack into Syria. But look at it from his point of view. Would you want to go down in the history books as President of the United States when it collapsed? I mean, that looks really, really bad on a resume. Okay?
Well, hopefully he would be in somewhat control of the truth. As long as the truth were to come out that, hey, I was the one here. I was the straw that broke the camel's back, for example. It's not.
But
it's not his fault.
You're absolutely right, though. But there are so many truths that could come on out that would result in the American people just saying, we refuse to recognize this government any longer. If it were to come on out, the real reasons for all these wars, the families of all those killed and crippled soldiers are going to say, this isn't what we signed up for. This is not what we sacrificed our children for, to make these corporations richer. We thought we were bringing good to the world. We were told that we were protecting our nation from some kind of a dire threat, and now we're finding out that our kids were killed and crippled for the sake of a stock price. There's the truth behind the John F. Kennedy assassination. If the American people just are forced to confront the fact that they've been lied to on this scale, yes, I do think the U.S. government would collapse, and it may yet transpire. That's essentially what happened in the former Soviet Union. Because of the samizdat and because of the fallout from Chernobyl and the attempt to pretend that that didn't happen, the Soviet people just said, this government lies to us about everything, we can't be part of this any longer. And it all began to crumble and fall apart. And there was a brief attempt at a counter-coup, counter-revolution rather, but in the end the Soviet Union collapsed and now we've got the new Russian republics.
That's right. And I believe it was Malcolm X that said, I'm for the truth, no matter who's telling it, and I'm for justice, no matter who it's for or who it's against.
That's
I think those are good.
I agree with that.
That's very important that we all live that way.
I agree with that. You remember what Jim Garrison said during his trial of Clay Shaw relative to the JFK assassination? Let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. And I agree with that one as well.
That's right. That's right. And like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me finish this thought here. I get a lot of email from detractors who are out there saying, even if what you're saying is true, don't you realize that by putting it out there, it is a threat to the government and is not our best course? Don't we have to preserve and protect the government? And my answer to that is always qualified. I said that depends on whether the government is worth preserving and protecting. If it's a government that is constitutional, whose primary focus, whose top priority is what is best for this nation and the American people, yeah, that's a government that's worth preserving and protecting, even if it means keeping certain secrets. But if you have a government that is plundering and pillaging the American people for the sake of their friends and their cronies and foreign governments and the war machine, I don't see that as a government that's worth preserving and protecting. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, a patriot is somebody who is loyal to his fellow American citizens all the time and to the government only when it deserves it. And I'm in agreement with that as well.
That's right. And if you listen to Kennedy's speech on secret societies, he's addressing the media, how the media and the CIA and the FBI, the deep state, basically a very dangerous entity that has basically taken over. And the people need to know the truth. The people need to know the truth, or people are going to die never knowing the truth, being brainwashed. And I know that not everyone's supposed to wake up, but they need to wake up. I want them to wake up so bad.
Yeah, well, they are. They are. That's the good news here. People deserve the truth. They need the truth. But the people have to be responsible for going on out and finding it for them, not just sit there on their sofa and wait for somebody like me or John Stadmiller to say, this is the truth. That doesn't really change the dynamic. What we need are media consumers who are themselves their own best researchers and analysts. And that is really the only way we're going to break this cycle of propaganda mind control. Because even now we're seeing some of the larger lights of the independent media being co-opted, being bought off, being threatened. Look at how Breitbart has changed since Breitbart left, and especially since Bannon left. It's been completely turned around. And so people need to just get into that habit. If something isn't making sense, sit on down, get into a search engine, not Google obviously, and start digging out the facts, dig out the articles, and decide for yourself what is really going on. At some point, there's going to be a watershed moment where the vast majority of the American people are going to realize the government is lying to them the vast majority of the time about the majority of everything. And at that point, we're going to start seeing a Soviet-style collapse in Washington, D.C.
That's right. I heard George Carlin talking the other day, an old video, where he was saying something to the effect, he was addressing the parents in this world. He said it was so important for them to teach their kids to read, but much more important to teach them to question everything they do read.
Yes, that was... Carlin is one of those people where it wasn't until he was gone that we realized just how important he was and what he had to say. And he masked it very well with his humor, but especially toward the end of his career, he was out there trying to sound the warnings about what was really going on. And he was able to deliver it in a way where people would laugh, and if people who are laughing, their defensive mechanisms won't kick in. and they're much more willing to accept and think about the ideas that he was feeding to them.
Uh-huh. Do you think we'll ever get an investigation of Susan Rice unmasking and Loretta Lynch and the Obama administration, all the crimes that we know that they did? You think we're ever going to get that investigated and prosecute the criminal?
I do not know. Time will solve that mystery, but one thing is very obvious. Inside Washington, D.C. is everybody is scrambling for political leverage. Everybody is scrambling to cover up all that's been going on. And I can imagine Donald Trump right now is under so much pressure from all these politicians. He might be out there thinking, let's recount that election. Maybe Hillary won after all.
Yeah, that's right. I heard something about Pelosi saying that Trump was going to impeach himself.
Well, I don't think she meant that as a joke. Alex, got to let you go. Alex, got to let you go. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. And Aloha America, welcome back to the show. And somebody just sent me an email about what they were doing with their Galaxy Note 4, and it twigged off a memory that at one point I did replace the battery in my wife's cell phone because it had gone bad. It wasn't holding a charge. Ordered a new battery off of eBay, slid it on in there. Everything's working just fine. Now, getting on back to the economic news, this is becoming a very alarming trend across the country. Down in Houston, where government is cash-strapped, they're selling off $2 million worth of city streets and utility easements, and it's just a tiny dent in the $100 million budget deficits projecting over the next 5 years. And they got about $2 million worth for these city streets and utility easements. There's only one small problem with that. The city government does not own those streets. The taxpayers do. And there are two aspects to this. First of all, it's a scam. Government comes on in and they tax you and they spend your money to build highways, whatever. Then they get into economic trouble and they decide they're going to sell their highway to a private company, which then turns it into a toll road. The government doesn't have a right to do that. Governments are doing that. That's what the U.S. government has been doing with all these land seizures and confiscations, even though it's a violation of the Enclave Clause of the Constitution. And the other part of it, of course, is all of this is a result of that private central banking model, which by design produces more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the entire nation and its people are debt slaves and the real hard assets wind up in the pockets of the bankers. The bankers are going to own the streets, the highways, the dams, the train systems. And all it cost them was paper and ink and complicit politicians. Everything that is in this nation, the highways, the utilities, ultimately was built and paid for by we, the American people. It's our property. And we have to work to keep it. Okay, now then, let's see. Interesting little article over in CBC talking about how car dealerships could be out of business within a decade, according to a new report from Rethink X, saying that greater demand for electric cars coupled with increased demand for ride-sharing will eliminate the need for car dealerships altogether. Well, where are you going to go for the electric car? I think what this article is really doing is pushing that Agenda 30, where cars are bad and really you should rely on public transportation. Merkel is out there saying that in a few years you'll need a special government license to own and drive a car. And right now in Japan, which is very high population density, you're not allowed to buy a car unless you can prove you actually have a place to park it. So, now, article out of New York Post, and we did refer to this earlier in the show, about the difficulties Donald Trump is facing with his economic to-do list, where he's talking about tax cuts, spending increases, paying for the immigration wall, renegotiating trade deals, creating jobs. And the problem is he's got nothing to work with. The U.S. government is $20 trillion in debt, and last year's deficit grew that staggering total by nearly $600 billion, more than $500 billion in a single year. And this means that the traditional cures for an economic crisis, spending more, lowering interest rates, aren't going to be able to work. We're at the end. We are definitely at the end here. Now, India was getting ready to invest quite a bit of money, $500 million, in a new port facility in Iran, and those investors are now starting to pull back out of fear that the U.S. is going to impose more sanctions on Iran just because the U.S. government feels like doing it. Because Iran hasn't done anything. Iran is in compliance with the P5+1 deal. Iran is not attacking and invading other countries, but by golly, we're going to sanction them just because we can. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. As long as we're on the subject of cell phones and batteries, along with gold and silver, one of the hot commodities right now in the world is lithium. And it's in a boom time right now, and a lot of people are trying to get on board and invest in lithium. But you need to be aware that the grade of the lithium is of critical importance because, as you know, some lithium batteries work really well. Other lithium batteries have had a problem with exploding. And the grade of the lithium, how many contaminants are in there, is a critical factor in that, so you need to pay attention to that. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, back in 2010, the U.S. identified vast riches of lithium in Afghanistan. And that may be another reason why we are still staying there, along with the oil pipeline right-of-way and all of that opium. Now, as you know, ever since Theresa May's snap UK election backfired on her, more and more people are talking about doubts on Brexit. Certainly the EU is saying, let's put it on hold, let's call it on off. The Remainers are out there saying, oh, see, this is the end of it. And again, the arrogance on display there because the people of Great Britain voted for Brexit. And ultimately, I do think democracy has to have a say here. If the people of a country want their freedom, they are allowed to have it. And again, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights comes to bear here. If the British people want to go on off, break off from the EU and be their own country, they are allowed to do it. And every other nation that is a member of the United Nations has to let them go. And that includes the member states of the European Union. But again, the rules only apply to the other people, not to us here. Meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn is out there saying politics is not going to go back into the box where it was before. Things are definitely changing, and already there are allegations that there was, in fact, massive election fraud, supposedly favoring Theresa May, but again, not enough to overcome a landslide that was shifting things back toward the anti-establishment, as it were. Now, as you know, you have Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, and one other that is saying that they're not going to accept any more refugees. They've got too many. They are causing problems. It is an economic hardship. And more people are saying this is why the European Union wants its own army, to march into these other countries and slap them down and say, you will do what Brussels tells you to do, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. And more of the member states of the EU are saying it almost feels like World War II's rise of the Nazis has been replayed when they weren't looking. Now, the former Czech President Klaus is saying the time has come for the Czech Republic to leave the European Union. So yet another member state is talking about breaking off. Meanwhile, up in Denmark, there are calls for the army to assist postal workers in one of their worst no-go zone ghettos. 9,000 refugees in there. Apparently the postal workers are being assaulted and the mail stolen. They want to send in the army with them. Up in Sweden, they've added 8 new areas to the Swedish police no-go zone list. Total of 53 areas that are outside the control of the Swedish authorities. If you walk in there, you are on your own. If you get into trouble, if the refugees attack you, nobody's coming to save you. Nobody is coming to save you. Down in Australia, this is a really ugly story. Over in Sydney, a teenager, 18-year-old girl, was abducted, raped, and forced to marry a Muslim man under Sharia law, and was then driven hundreds of kilometers away from her family. And the police have caught up with the guy, but apparently the man had approached the family about wanting to acquire this girl as a wife. They turned him down, obviously. So apparently he entered her bedroom at 2 o'clock in the morning and threatened to kill her unless she went with him. Took her away, raped her, forced her to go through the wedding ceremony. And I think this is one of the reasons why so many people are saying it would be a mistake to allow Sharia law to be brought to our countries. If these refugees want to live under Sharia law, they should have stayed at home. And again, I go back to Teddy Roosevelt, who said, very simply, if you are an immigrant to this country, welcome. Just understand you are coming to a new country, the United States of America, which already has its own laws. It has its own language, English, and you are expected to abide by the laws of the United States of America. Now, whatever gods you want to worship or how you want to celebrate your culture in your communities, in your home, is just fine. But don't come on in and demand that we change our country to be like the country you just came from. That's rude. Apparently, immigration arrested dozens of undocumented Chaldeans from Detroit over this last weekend. And down in Mexico, Mexican authorities found 112 undocumented migrants, including 4 babies, being transported inside a cargo truck on a road in the southeast of the country. 23 of the migrants were minors, and they were discovered when somebody inside the vehicle was talking when they were at a checkpoint. Now, to the credit of the people smugglers, the trailer was equipped with fans and water. It's not like one of these tragedies where they throw all these people into a cargo container and there's no air, no water, and some of them actually die. They actually did fit this cargo, the trailer out to have ventilation and water. But it's still people smuggling, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. Over at the University of North Georgia, there has been another fake rape hoax. And apparently this 19-year-old Rebecca Lim called 911 and claimed she'd been running along this popular lake trail in Lumpkin County on May 24th, and a man followed her and then raped her, and she's now been charged with filing false statements. Somebody desperate for attention. I think one of the downsides of our media-saturated world is people tend to be dissatisfied with their own lives if they're not famous for something. And again, growing up as a farm kid in New England, it wasn't really an issue. We were just happy with who we were and that people within our town thought well of us. And that was it. We didn't have this lust for fame and stardom on televisions. Now it's being promoted that everybody should want to be a media star, certainly on social media. I think those selfie sticks are a horrible, horrible symptom of how self-obsessed and vain the American culture has become. I certainly don't have one, don't intend to have one. I've only ever taken one selfie in my entire life, and that was to prove to one of our readers that I was actually wearing the T-shirt they had sent to me. Now, as you know, there's been a push for police body cameras so that there is a supposedly impartial record of what happens in a confrontation between the police and the citizens. And more often, the body camera footage tends to show police acting improperly. And for that reason, the body cameras are mysteriously malfunctioning, or as was the case with Seth Rich's murder, the videos simply disappear. But apparently, in states like North Carolina, Louisiana, and Kansas, they're now writing laws that police body camera footage is now a state secret. And these laws are designed to keep these videos from being allowed out into the public, which sort of negates the whole reason to have these police body cameras. I mean, obviously, if the body camera supports the police officer's side of the story, they're glad to have that video. But in cases where the police are shown to be misbehaving, oh, we can't have that. It's undermining confidence in the police, as it were. All right, let's see. We're going to grab a quick phone call. Nabil in Kansas City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how are you? I just want to correct you on the Sharia law that you just stated a few minutes ago.
Yes?
The Sharia law is, if you look at it, it's really a protection for women and their rights. What this guy did was he just followed his lusts and desires, and if he lived in a true country where there was Sharia law, he would probably be beheaded for what he did to her.
Well, that, I think, would be a fitting punishment. But again, it almost doesn't matter whether it's Sharia law or any other law. This is the United States of, well, in the case of this, it was Australia. Australian law applies. No other law should apply. And the same thing here in the United States of America, where we had all these protests over the last weekend, where all these refugees are agitating, saying, we want our system of laws in this country. No, if you come to this country, you live under our system of laws. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here and get on back to the news because we're running out of time, and I got a lot of stuff to cover here. Political correctness has really gone over the top. This is a bizarre story, and it's out of Post News D2. And apparently over at Stack Exchange, which has a parenting forum, there is a future father saying that his now expectant wife has decided she wants to raise all the children in their marriage genderless, and she wants to make one of them gay. Because apparently that's now the trendy, hip, politically correct thing to do. And first and foremost, as I understand it, you cannot make somebody gay any more than you can unmake somebody who is gay. It's genetically determined. Now, we did a story about this New Jersey school where somebody noticed in the yearbook that photos of students who were wearing Donald Trump T-shirts, the names had been removed before the yearbook went to press, and apparently it all came down to a single teacher who was a liberal Democrat who just took it upon themselves to alter the photos. That teacher has now been suspended, and I think that's a really good idea. If you're going to teach students about the Bill of Rights and freedom of speech, you start in the school. Unfortunately, under Common Core, they're teaching them something else completely. Remember U.S. Pastor Terry Jones, and he's always out there with all this controversial stuff. He had announced a plan that he was going to burn hundreds of copies of the Quran to mark the anniversary of the September 11 attacks. Apparently, he's been prevailed on to call that stunt off, and I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. I'm opposed to book burning, and I don't care what the books are. Getting onto computers, apparently Apple is remember they had a marketing campaign that they were somehow immune to malware. No, they aren't. Developers are giving away the most sophisticated Mac spyware ever that can allow your device to be taken over. And apparently one of them, Mac Ransom, is an Apple version of WannaCry. So that WannaCry ransomware is now hitting Apple computers. It was only a matter of time. China is denying that WannaCry originated with them, and I think they're trying to say it came from China or it came from Russia or it came from Iran to sort of obfuscate the fact that the vast majority of the code inside WannaCry came from the National Security Agency. And they are to blame, first of all, for developing this cybercrime tool, and second of all, for being so reckless as to allow it to get leaked on out. Interesting little variation on malware coming by email. This one is from DVLA. It's a car scam warning, and it includes inside the text, if you think this might be a phishing email, please forward to phishing@dvia.gsi.gov.uk. And the BBC came on out and said, this is a new one for a fake DVLA email that says, please refer to DVLA if you think this is a fake. Apparently, Coinbase is now seizing the accounts of Americans, and they seized him here in Hawaii and Wyoming, basically stealing the Bitcoins that were in there. And apparently Natural News did an investigation confirming Coinbase is citing obscure state laws to seize the accounts. And this actually happened to me. Somebody was trying to get me into cryptocurrency, set me up a Coinbase account. There were some coins in there, and they simply vanished. I hadn't put any of my own money in there, so no skin off my nose. But apparently it wasn't this sudden new Hawaii law. It was just Coinbase saying, well, we're just going to shut it on down. So we've got to be careful of scammers out there. Let's see. I'm going to skip on down here because we're running out of time and I want to get to these stories here. And this is about human-caused global warming. Yet again, this year, there was an expedition going up into the Arctic in summer to document the loss of the Arctic ice cap. And once again, they've had to turn back because the ice is so thick, their icebreakers can't get through it. And there were about 40 scientists from 5 Canadian universities were scheduled to use the icebreaker CCGS Amundsen. And apparently, because of the ice they found off the coast of Newfoundland, the icebreaker had to be diverted. They keep doing the same mistake over and over again. Meanwhile, snow is falling in Northern California. It's falling around Lake Tahoe right now. It really is the beginning of a new ice age, and of course Al Gore's out there saying, please see my new movie, I need to make money, as if he didn't have enough money already. Apparently the U.S. has now seized Kim.com's assets, even though he's never set foot in the United States of America. And I think this is them being very, very angry at Kim.com, basically speaking out about how Seth Rich was the DNC leak. They're trying to keep the leak on that one. They've bet what's left of their credibility on this Russia did it, Russia did it. And again, looking at the opening statements at this morning's hearings with Attorney General Sessions, it was, Russia interfered with the elections. Russia did that. It's being proclaimed as an absolute fact beyond question. If you question that narrative, you're a wide-eyed, tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy kook who should be reviled by all polite society. Remember what I said about the medical establishment is all about making money and they don't care what it does to the patients. Apparently, this is out of Natural News, millions of patients are being overdosed with blood pressure medication. And apparently, the medication is being overprescribed because it makes more money that way. And that's over and above this opiate epidemic that's coming out of doctors and the pharmacies to create a permanent class of addicts. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today here. And we're talking about how the medical industrial complex is all about selling product and making money with zero concern for actual health. And a good example of that is coming out of Missouri. Apparently, a couple of children's watchdog groups have filed a complaint saying that the Missouri's foster care system is not maintaining oversight over the use of psychotropic drugs on foster children. And the complaint argues that the kids are just being medicated as an automatic basis to sedate them, to tranquilize them, and apparently expose them to serious risk of side effects from diabetes to outright seizures. But it makes money, just keep on pumping it into the arms here. Now, this one is a little disappointing, in part because I actually taught at UCLA Extension many, many years ago. And this is coming out of the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. And it involves an 8-year-old who, for some reason, had gone into cardiac arrest after nearly drowning in a washing machine at his Castaic home. Now, that's a bizarre case there, but here's where it goes on in. Physicians at UCLA's Pediatric Intensive Care Unit told the family the child was technically not brain dead, but was never going to recover normal neurofunction, could never reawaken. So the parents decided to take Cole off life support and donate his organs, a very noble thing to do. And he was removed from the ventilator and 23 minutes later pronounced dead by an anesthesiologist. Now that's how it should work. But 4 years later, it has come on out that homicide detectives are looking into an allegation by a coroner's investigator that the anesthesiologist gave this kid a fatal dose of the opioid fentanyl to hasten his death in order to make the organs more likely to be successfully harvested. Now, that to me, first of all, the Hippocratic principle is, first of all, do no harm. It's not actually in the Hippocratic Oath, but it's in Hippocrates' other writings. You don't harm the patient. And here we have an anesthesiologist who's seeing product on a gurney, the same way that Planned Parenthood does. These aren't human beings. They're not people. It's product. Let's cut the product up and get into the package and get it into the supply chain here. Now, apparently, yet another holistic doctor has been gunned down outside an organic restaurant in Colorado. Christopher Bailey King, 49, is the latest in a long series of holistic doctors to be murdered in cold blood. And apparently, he was just eating at this restaurant. He was approached by a man named Louis Joseph Sebastian. They got into an argument, and the doctor was killed. But there do seem to be a lot of these doctors who are a threat to the orthodox chemical-based selling product medical establishment. They all seem to be meeting very untimely ends here. Somebody found a video from back in 1971 that said the FDA never tested vaccines for effectiveness and they could be harmful. And the video went away. It's on whatreallyhappened.com. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program. We will be back tomorrow here Wednesday on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please share everything you learn here with everyone that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.